Alright guys, welcome back to the channel, and welcome to episode 19 of the month of metal. Today I'm painting this Gorger from the Ogre Kingdoms line. This model was originally released in 2004 and was sculpted by Mark Harrison. I started off by priming this guy brown and then zenithaling him with pale clamshell. However, after I had done that, I realized I was originally going to paint him with contrast paint, but then I decided that I wanted to try an old technique I used to use on 15mm miniatures, which is where you undercoat the miniature with brown and then leave some of that brown in the deepest recesses and the gaps between different materials. And it gives you kind of this really stark, contrasty look, but it works pretty well on 15mm miniatures, and I just wanted to see what it would look like on a bigger miniature like this. So I could have just primed this guy brown, but I was already sitting at the painting table and I wanted to get stuck in. So I just used some Garagax sewer here and just covered the primer completely. Once that was all nice and dry, I started in with my first actual colors, and I'm using a bunch of different colors in this video, but I'm not going to read out every single color. I'm just going to read out the types of colors I'm using. So starting off here, I started with the Cool Reds hexad from Army Painter. And I just basically started at the dark end and worked my way up to the light end. Sort of wet blending, but not specifically focused on wet blending. If one of the under layers dried first before I got to the next layer, I'm not worried about it. But just working my way up through the highlights to get a highlighted red loincloth here. And like I said in the beginning, leaving a little bit of that brown in between the folds and in the deepest recesses, just to see how that works out. So then I moved on to the skin, and for this I'm using the ruddy brown hexad. And so just like the loincloth, I just grabbed one of the darker ones, base coated in the big muscle groups, then got a lighter one, painted in maybe 80% of those muscle groups, and then again picked a higher or a lighter color and painted in maybe 40% of those muscle groups. And you can kind of work it back and forth. So I would, put on the darker color, then work the middle color in, and then bring the darker color back a little bit if I overdid the middle color, and then go up to the highest color. And you just kind of work it back and forth until you're happy with it. For me, this is a speed paint. This isn't like for competition or anything. I'm just getting this guy on the table. So I think total paint time for this guy was maybe an hour and a half. So I'm not super worried about it. I just, again, worked the colors back and forth until I was happy with the final look. Once that was all done, I moved on to the hair. And I wanted the hair to stick out from the rest of the miniature. The miniature so far is fairly red. The skin sort of has a reddish brown color, and obviously the loincloth is red, so I decided to go for blue. This was before I had made some decisions about the later colors, so maybe I would have changed this once I realized what color I was going to do all the cloth bits on him, but that's okay. I'm still happy with it. So I went for the strong blues hexad here, and I just did two of the colors, mostly because there's so much detail and stuff woven into his hair that I didn't really want to highlight up through 3 or 4 colors. I just wanted to base coat the hair, highlight the hair, and then move on to all the stuff that's interwoven into it. So I just used 2 colors here. I didn't start all the way at the bottom of this hexad either. I started in the middle and then chose a lighter color from there, and just kind of worked it around, not highlighting each individual strand of hair, just highlighting the volumes of hair. I'm not sure which method is more realistic, highlighting each strand versus the volumes, but highlighting the volumes is easier, and so for a speed paint, that's what I went with. So then I was trying to figure out what color I was going to do all the cloth bits that are on him, and I looked around at all my paints, and I was going to do them in brown, but, the model's already really brown. And then my eyes fell on the turquoise hexad from Army Painter, and I just really love this, one of my favorite groups of colors. And so I decided I would do that for all this cloth. Now making that decision, maybe I should have picked a different color for the hair, so that there's not so much of this two-toned blue kind of clashing with itself. But, I don't think this Ogre Gorger is really like picking out his wardrobe to match or contrast appropriately, so I'm not super worried about it. I used the darkest color from the hex head to start off here, just to base coat all the cloth, again leaving some brown in the deepest recesses. And then I got one of the middle tones and just highlighted them. Not super focused on exactly edge highlighting every single thing, just kind of picking out the main volumes and highlighting them. Then I moved on to all the bones that are woven into his hair and hanging off his skin. I knew that I wanted to try to get his bones, like his nails and his teeth, to be a different color than the rest of these bones. And while I did use different colors, I'm not sure I really did a good job at differentiating them. They kind of look pretty similar, especially from like 3 feet away. So maybe that's something I go back and add some washes to one of them just to differentiate them a little bit. But regardless, I used the light neutrals hexad for these bones. Started all the way at the bottom, then worked my way up to the middle, and then finally towards the top of the hexad. Basically the same thing as the skin. I painted base coated with the darkest color, then painted 60 to 80% of the bone with the middle color, and then 20 to 40% with the lightest color. This goes pretty quickly. You might have to work back and forth a couple times, like on this big bone on the leg here. I almost completely covered the second color, and I needed to work back up. So then I went on to his bones, or in this case, just his nails and his teeth. I used the deep skin tone hexad for this. Started again at the very bottom with the darkest color, base coating completely, then worked up to the middle color, 60% of each nail in this case, and then up towards the top end, just the very tip of each nail. Like I said, I don't think I differentiated them well enough from the bones that are woven into his skin and hair, but I may come back and fix that at a later date if I'm really unhappy with it. So then he's just got a little bit of rope here on his right hand. So I used the ochres and tan hexad for this. I started pretty close to the darkest end of the hexad and just base coated each individual rope segment. One of the great things about these old metal miniatures is that the rope segments are very well defined usually. They make painting them super easy. The modern plastic miniatures, that weave on the rope can be so tight, and the depth of the weave is not always there, and it makes it hard to paint, at least for me sometimes. So I just base coated each segment with a dark color, and then at the top end of the ochres and tans just highlighted just maybe 30% of each of these segments with one of the lighter colors. Then I went on to a couple finishing touches. First, I started with Berserker Bloodshade, and I just worked this into the darker areas of his skin. I've painted a bunch of the plastic Gorgers that just came out last year, and I went with kind of an Urukai Berserker sort of feel of dark skin, and they have like all that blood kind of just matted on their skin. So I wanted this to be similar to that. I didn't go the exact same paint scheme, but I just wanted his skin to have a little bit more of a red tint to it, so that he's either like worked up a bloodlust, or maybe he's just got some blood on him from his various activities. I'm not really sure, but I just wanted his skin to be tinted towards the red end of things. And then finally, I took some dark blue tone from the Army Painter, which I think is either I have a defective bottle of it or is improperly named. Mine is very green. Maybe that's intended, maybe it's not. But in this case, that is what I wanted, knowing that my dark blue tan is very green. That's what I wanted. Just to work a little bit of that green in the shadows here, just to contrast with the red. And it'll still work pretty well as a shade for the blue, because it's kind of close to blue in that, in the sense that green is sort of close to blue. But I just used this again in the darkest recesses, up around the hair, in all the cloth, around some of the bones, in the absolute deepest recesses of like where the skin meets the loin cloth and stuff like that. I think I did some in his mouth also. And with that, he was done. I just put him on a simple tuft base here. I'm going to come back and make a scenic base for him eventually, but I didn't want to do that for this video, mostly because I don't know what kind of base I'm going to give him yet. But this base is fine for taking pictures and posting on the internet, and that's all I need to do right now. But thank you everybody for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I would encourage you to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you tomorrow for episode 20 of the month of Metal.